You know the feeling. You've got a new workout in your favorite app, you go into the gym, but you find out you haven't got half the equipment, or one of the exercises hurts your shoulder, or it just doesn't make any sense. I see this all the time, and it's the exact reason why so many people spin their wheels in the gym. So I'm going to show you how to design a workout that fits your goals, your body, and your schedule, not somebody else's template. After 25 years of coaching in gyms and online, I've seen what truly works. And honestly, it's not usually the flashy stuff that you see in some of these programs. Now, there are a lot of apps on the market, but the problem often comes from maybe the gym layout. Potentially you've got an injury that you're working around, or you might have very specific goals. You might be working towards a push-up or pull-up, and these programs don't necessarily get all the things that you want in your workout to actually achieve what you're after. I've done full lectures on this topic, and I could talk about this for hours, but I'm just going to show you the key things you need to know to maximize your program. So the first thing you need to think about before you start thinking about exercise selection or your split is actually your training frequency. How often can you realistically train per week and commit to long term? Is it 2, 3, or 4 sessions per week, or maybe even more? When you know your training frequency, you can start to think about the next step, which is what's your overall goal? Are you training for pure strength? If so, you're going to have fewer exercises per workout. You're going to be doing lower rep ranges on each exercise. You're going to need longer rest periods per exercise too, and more total sets on the exercises that you're doing. Or are you more interested in hypertrophy, building muscle? If so, you'll probably be doing 6 to 8 exercises per workout. You're going to have a mixture of rep ranges for these exercises, anywhere between 6 up to 30 reps, because research shows us we can build muscle at a whole spectrum of different rep ranges. And your rest periods will vary anywhere from 60 seconds up to say 2 minutes. Or are you interested in speed and power work? If so, similar to the strength workout, you'll probably be doing fewer exercises per workout so you can focus on the velocity and the speed of the movement, with longer rest periods to make sure you're not getting too fatigued from one exercise to the next. Now, a quick clarification around fat loss training. Fat loss actually isn't something we train for. This is much more an overall focus on nutrition, exercise habits, sleep. So if fat loss is your overall goal, I'd actually suggest to do more of a hypertrophy session, so you're looking to try and preserve or build a little bit of muscle whilst in a diet phase. But to be really honest, the majority of people I talk to want a kind of mixture of all those things. They want to get a bit stronger, they want to move faster and be more powerful, they want to build some muscle overall, so you can do mixed modality sessions. So you might want to pick one exercise for a strength focus at a lower rep range, maybe 2 to 3 exercises that you can work on hypertrophy, and then maybe 1 or 2 speed and power exercises. Now stick with me here, because by the end of this video, you'll know how to structure your program to suit your goals. So now we know your training frequency and what your overall goal is going to be for this training program. Now we can start thinking about how to organize the program. Let's talk training splits. If you're training between 1 up to 3 times per week, I would suggest that full body workouts generally suits that training frequency. I know some people really like push, pull, legs, which I'm not completely against, but more up-to-date research shows us that training a muscle group between 2 to 3 times per week could be beneficial, especially if the goal is building muscle. So I generally suggest to stay away from the push-pull legs format. If you're training 4 times per week, it's probably worthwhile doing an upper and lower split that you rotate through twice. And if you're doing more than 4 times per week, then potentially you could think about adding an additional accessory day on top of that. The challenge with training more than 4 times per week, as we'll get into later in this video, is managing the fatigue from one workout to the next. So now you've chosen your split, let's start thinking about these exercises. Exercises fall into categories. For the lower body, we have knee dominant pushing patterns like your leg press and your squats. We have hip dominant hinge patterns like your RDLs and your back extension. You also have isolation knee dominant patterns like leg extension, and isolation pulling patterns like hamstring curls. Moving on to the upper body, we have horizontal presses, that's your chest press and push-up variations. Horizontal pulls, that's your rowing variations. And then we have vertical patterns that work up and down. Your vertical pushes are shoulder presses, and your vertical pulls are things like lat pull downs and chin ups. And you have isolation exercises for things like biceps and triceps. Now I appreciate you can go more granular than this, but for most people I would say to stick to those basic patterns, and that will cover the majority of your bases. So now it's time to build your 3-day training plan. You want to choose 3 knee dominant pushing patterns or an isolation push for the lower body, 3 hip hinge variations or an isolation pull for the lower body, and then for the upper body you want to choose 3 pushing patterns and 3 pulling patterns. So this means that every workout has each of those 4 primary patterns of movement. Of course, we want to expand this to more than just those 4 patterns and actually build this up to maybe 6 exercises per workout. Now this is a chance for you to be very goal orientated. Maybe you're working towards a push-up, pull-up, or a single leg exercise. Maybe you're working around an injury that you want to focus on some rehabilitation exercises. Or maybe you want to directly target a particular muscle to build, like say your calves or your biceps. So you'd get to select 6 more exercises to lay out across those 3 days. If this kind of no-nonsense training advice helps you, then make sure you hit subscribe to the channel. I post new content every week to help you train smarter. So now you've chosen these exercises to put into your 3 days. What I will say is this is your first draft and we're going to refine this as we go through the building process. Let's say for argument's sake, you've chosen a squat, a leg press and a walking lunge as your knee dominant variations to have 1 in each day. They're 3 pretty taxing exercises, so you might purposely choose to take the walking lunge out and bring in a leg extension in, which is just a lower skill exercise. And then you might choose to gap the hardest exercises. So the squat and the leg press, you can use the most external load. So you could have that on day 1 and day 3. And then in day 2, you can put the leg extension. So you purposely put the easier knee dominant movement between the 2 workouts. Then for your hinge patterns and pulling movements, you might have selected an RDL, a back extension and a leg curl. The RDL is most taxing, so it makes sense to pair that in the day that you have the leg extension. The leg curl is the easiest, so I'd put that with the squat because that's gonna be the most taxing squat variation. This way, we've spread out the most challenging parts of the workout and it gives you the best chance of pushing the hard exercises with real effort and not getting overly fatigued. The upper body is usually a lot less taxing, so you probably haven't got to think about this kind of thing, but maybe you are trying to work on some pull-up variations. I've done a whole video to explain how you can work up to your first pull-up, so make sure you watch that. But you might put a banded pull-up into day 1 and then a negative pull-up into day 3. Both of those are vertical pulling patterns, so it makes sense to have a horizontal pull in day 2. So you might choose a machine-based row variation. Now when it comes to your upper body pushes, you might have noticed you've got a shoulder injury, and when you do shoulder presses, that causes some pain. So you might purposefully pick to just do horizontal presses. A machine chest press in day 1, a push-up in day 2, and a dumbbell chest press in day 3. So now you've strategically positioned your upper and lower body exercises, you can have a look through to think where about these exercises sit in your gym, and maybe is there a better organization to make sure you can go from one exercise to the next, just to make sure logistically this works in your gym. Now let's think about the order of these exercises. What you do first, you're gonna be freshest at. So let's say you're really focusing on those pull-up variations. If you want to make sure you're optimizing your chance of progressing those, let's get those at the top of the workout. All I would say with doing that is just be mindful that pull-ups are quite grip based. So if you've got a lot of exercises running afterwards that are quite hard on the grip, just think about that because you might find yourself getting really fatigued during the session. And now to finish off these workouts, we can position in the exercises that you selected that are important to you. Maybe you've got some direct arm training, so biceps and triceps can go into day 1. Maybe some direct core training goes into day 2, like a reverse crunch or a hanging hollow hold. And then in day 3, you might add in some shoulder rehab exercises to work on that dodgy shoulder. So now you've created your 3-day workout, taking your goals, your limitations, and your injuries into account. I'd suggest to stick to that program, repeating it weekly for about 16 weeks. Maybe at the 8-week stage, make a couple of changes to the workout to make sure it's fresh and to make sure you're not getting bored. And you can go through that whole process to rebuild it after 16 weeks, so you've got lots of new novelty to work at. Of course, we need to work rep ranges. At the start, I spoke about your goals. If you can think about some of these exercises, you might decide to make them more strength focused. By default, the pull-up variations are instantly going to be quite low rep. Maybe the squat, the RDL, and one of your pressing variations for chest, you might move towards lower reps. Lower reps means you can lift heavier load and gives you a better chance of focusing on a strength progression rather than it being a rep progression. Then things like your leg press, your back extension, your leg curls, they can be more than moderate rep range zones. And some of your isolation exercises like bicep curls and tricep pushdown, maybe you can work on more high rep muscular endurance. The key principle when it comes to rep ranges really is there is no right or wrong. Obviously low reps means you can progress the load a little bit easier, but when you're doing high reps, it's going to be much more obvious you're going to add repetitions to it. The key thing to focus on is to have a rep range. Don't say you're doing 8 reps, 3 sets. Give yourself a range between 6 to 10 reps for 3 sets. That way you can do a set working up to a weight that's correct for say 10 reps, But when you go heavier, you'll come back down to 6 reps, then build back up. The only time I would suggest to have a single rep as a focus is when you're doing very low rep training. Maybe 1, 2, 3, or 4 reps, you'd actually focus on just having a single rep count to focus on. Anything above 6 reps, I definitely work in that range of reps. Now to finish up, if you can take one thing away from this video, it's that your workout needs to be built around you. If you can stop copying random workouts and start structuring a workout that's focused on you, everything's gonna change. You're gonna get consistent, build progression, and get more confident in the gym. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.